Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Welcome, friends, to the next chapter with Charlie. My very special guest is Jack Calhoun. He's the founder and president of the Encore Career Lab, where he helps professionals reinvent their lives after their primary career is over. Jack founded Encore Career Lab to show you how to create a perfect encore career that keeps you feeling engaged, purposeful, and joyful, while still providing all the freedom and flexibility you've been craving when you leave your first career behind. It seems Jack and I swim in very similar ponds. Let's find out and let's bring him on the show. Jack Calhoun, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate the invite. Yeah, I think we are. We're swimming in the same end of the pool for sure.
Same end of the pool, yeah. And let's hope it's not too deep. But yes. I don't care. I can swim, so deepness doesn't matter. You know, Jack, I got to tell you, I am a resident in the realm of what you have so well titled the Encore Career. I love that title. Mm-hmm. And that is the career you now have when the career you had comes to an end.
Yep.
And you know, I got to tell you, I've got a question right to begin with.
Yep.
As I progress down this path, there is one question that seems to haunt me and my friends who are entering. I have friends entering their retirement phase, and the question is, what do I do when there is nothing I have to do?
Yeah, it's a challenge. The phrase that I use is almost identical is, when you can do anything, how do you decide what anything is, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a first world problem, right? I mean, we are lucky, I guess, in a lot of ways that we have this to contemplate, but it's a strange experience, I think. And it's one that really was created culturally for us, that we kind of inherited this view of, life as a binary experience, right? We have a working period of our life, and then we have a recreating period of our life, is sort of the way that the culture has evolved. And it came out of the Social Security Act in the 1930s. They were trying to force older workers out of the workplace. People were in much worse shape back then, and life expectancy was 61, and the economy was heavily into manufacturing and agriculture. And, people really weren't very capable of doing that kind of physically demanding work in their 60s. And
right.
It was the middle of the Depression. And so they were trying to create a social safety net, and they added a provision that said, if you want to get your benefits when you turn 65, you can't work anymore. And so that was the first time as a society that this idea was created that, I'm going to work from the time I'm, 20, 22, whatever that is, to 65, and then I'm not going to work anymore, and I'm just going to collect, right? And I'm just going to recreate and leisure. And that was not a big deal when the life expectancy was 61, right? Because most people didn't even live long enough to collect it.
Right.
And if you did, you might have a few years, and really retirement pretty much marked the end of, your ability to be productive, and you were just sort of winding it down. But, along the way, life expectancies have stretched out dramatically. Now, if you make it to age 60, you have a life expectancy of about age 85. You have a 50-50 shot of hitting 90, right? And so as technology evolves and medical care and AI infusing all of this, we're going to start seeing people living over 100, I think, routinely, right? I mean, there already are a lot of people that are centenarians. And so I think it's just as a society, it's time to contemplate whether this is a good idea to cling to, right? We've sort of kept the default of this life of endless leisure. But, I use the term or the idea, we've all been on a vacation that went just a bit too long, right? A couple of days more than maybe we needed. And we kind of get edgy, start itching to get back and do something, right?
Yeah.
Well, imagine that's 25 or 30 years of your life. Which,
well, I know.
Right?
It's a third. It truly is a third of your life.
Yeah. And it's a one-way ticket on what I call the decline railway, right? As opposed to an incline railway, and it's little incremental steps down, and it starts with sort of losing your spark. You lose your purpose and your passion. A lot of times men are particularly this way. You lose your social connections, or maybe you never had real strong social connections outside of work.
Well, that's huge. That's huge for longevity and social connection. Yeah,
it is. And so you get more and more isolated. A lot of times we, kind of end up in these very tight relationships with our spouses. And then all of a sudden you're atrophying, right? And you don't wake up every day with a sense of purpose and opportunity. You wake up with a sense of how am I going to feel today, right? and it sneaks up on you, I think. And so what I saw, I was in the wealth management business. I was the managing principal and the majority owner of a registered investment advisory firm for most of my career, 20 plus years. I spent lots of time helping my clients plan for retirement. These were all successful people, business owners and wealthy families and attorneys and physicians and all types of people who were what I call career invested, right? Their career was a big part of their identity. And, when I was doing most of this work, I was in my 30s and 40s. And I couldn't understand why so many of my clients floundered when they retired, even though their financials looked great. And I had to live it to understand it. And as it happened, I sold my company when I was about 50. I'm 59 now. And it was really sort of a spur of the moment thing. There's a lot of opportunity that popped up all of a sudden. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let's do this. Let's go reinvent ourselves. It'll be fun. And it was really disorienting. I was really naive about how hard it was going to be. And it wasn't the financial.
And that is interesting. And that's what you did your life up to that point, preparing people for this, but you prepared them for it financially. You weren't able to prepare them, or didn't even have the wherewithal to prepare them for it as you're doing now with such a thing as Encore Career.
Right. What we talked about with our clients beyond the financials was things like legacy and wealth transfer and charitable giving and all the stuff that no matter where you go, the boxes are kind of all the same, right? But what there's really very little grasp of is that people need to keep doing things that are work related. It just needs to be different from this grindy corporate work they did their whole lives, right? It needs to transition into our life's work.
I love that. What process do you offer? How do they figure out? Because, I think so many people, I'm fortunate in that my career was always been independent. I've always sort of created and started and, I sort of changed my career pace every 7 to 10 years. I do something just a little bit different. So I'm used to being very creative. And even for me, it's been a challenge, man. Yeah. It has been a challenge. What do I do? And I like what you talk about, let me go back and read this thing that was just that I like the adjectives you used. That keeps you engaged, purposeful, and joyful.
Yeah.
Those should be, you talked about Simon Sinek and the why questions. Those are the why questions, are they not? They're not the what questions. Those are the why questions. How do I create a career that keeps me feeling engaged, purposeful, and joyful? That's it. Yeah. That's really you've nailed it with those three adjectives.
Yeah, well, you threw me right into it. You threw me a softball, so thank you, Charlie.
That's my job.
I'm a big fan of Simon.
No, it's early in the game. We're not in the ninth inning yet when the closer comes
You
in.
threw me one of those right fielder coming in for the relieving things pitches, right?
Yeah, that's my son, the catcher. He comes in in the 10-0 games or 15-0 games. When the other team is winning, he's the pitcher.
He's lobbing them over. I love it. Well, you mentioned Simon Sinek, start with why. I love that concept. And that's what I found is, I think, a big part of the problem. I experienced it, which was when you aren't able to answer the question, what do you do? And you've spent your whole career your whole adult life being able to answer that question, and you're proud of it typically, right? I'm an attorney, I'm in real estate, I'm a nurse, I'm a teacher, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. We don't say, I teach children or I advise people on their investments. We say, I'm an investment advisor. I'm a teacher. And so what we do, we literally describe that as being who we are. And when that goes away,
right, it becomes our identity.
It becomes
an
existential
kind of crisis. My core.
Right. And so what we tend to do, people who are what I call career invested, which just means that we took our career seriously. We were strivers, trying to advance and attain a certain level, however we defined it. That is a real strange feeling for us. And so we tend to rush into things to get the what answered, right? And what happens is we oftentimes end up on wrong paths. And it happened to me on a couple of things. They weren't wrong in and of themselves. They just weren't well suited for me.
Right.
And one of the things I did was to create a consumer product. I created a Wi-Fi cooking thermometer, of all things. I don't know why I thought it was a great idea to go into a consumer product after being in professional services, but I'm a big outdoor smoking and grilling fan, and there was no Wi-Fi thermometer out there. It was all Bluetooth, and I saw an opportunity as a business opportunity, and there was one, and I put together a development team, and we built the product, and the product worked great, and the market, the industry was brutal. B2C electronics is a brutal competitive world to try to compete in. And I was so obsessed with the creating, which is what I love. I didn't spend enough time thinking about, well, what if it doesn't go perfectly, right? Because my thought was to create it and sell it. And then, different things happened and the market slowed down and there was foreign competition and stuff. And so I just kind of got stuck in managing it, and I hated it. I hated the industry, and I wound it down. Eventually I just said, I don't want to be here. And then that led to a lot of soul searching, right? So sometimes our best ahas come out of our darkest nights of the soul.
Not
right?
Sometimes. I think most of our best thoughts come out of downtimes.
Yeah. We don't learn anything while we're on vacation in Bermuda, right?
Yeah.
And so I was mad at myself in a way, right? I looked back and I thought, I spent my whole career advising people on how to retire successfully, and here I've gotten into an area that wasn't well suited for me. And I should have known it. And why didn't I know it? And that led to this sort of epiphany. Well, I focused on the what. I didn't spend enough time on the why. And why do I want to get into this? What itch is it scratching for me personally, right?
Okay.
And that was my epiphany. I was like, oh, yeah, if there had been a framework, a process, a blueprint I could have gone through when I sold my company, or for anybody, when they leave their career and get oriented for this next phase and get the why clear before we get into the what, then I would have had a much better chance of success. And I know it would have kept me from going down that path with consumer electronics, which was, an expensive lesson to learn. And so that was when I thought, okay, well, reflecting back to my wealth management days, I realized we were missing a huge part of this. We're missing this identity part, this existential part. And so that's really what I'm trying to do with this. I'm trying to help people who have been very invested in their careers, who feel like they still have a lot to offer. They're not really interested in what I call the do-nothing retirement model. They are interested in parts of it, right? They want to be able to play golf at 11 on a Wednesday if that's what they want
Sure,
to do.
sure.
But they don't want that to be all they do, right? And they want to fill the void that is the meaning and purpose, and for a lot of people, continued income, right? And so that's what the mission of Encore Career Lab is to help people who have a lot left to offer and want to figure out this sort of hybrid way of doing this third act where we're staying engaged and purposeful and generating the income that we need to live the life we want to live. And we have the freedom and the flexibility to do it in the way that we want to do it,
I love that. So tell me, so that's what Encore Career Lab is all about.
Yep,
It's
that's our
all about a
mission.
process. How do you do that?
Yep. And so for us, it starts with why, which I call the discernment and reflection phase.
Okay.
And our program is 12 weeks. And so that part is self-study. And we go from the why, where we're getting into, one of the things we do is this, what we call the wisdom inventory. It's reflecting back on these major life milestones, these times of learning. We talked about the dark night of the soul. Some of
John
them
of the
are
Cross.
difficult. Some of them are just, informative, right? I mean, sometimes they're positive things, but they're all major milestones in our life, right? So let's reflect back on those and what did we learn about ourselves, right? What was the experience and who did we become on the other side of that experience? And what we start to do is we get a picture of ourselves as what we know now that we didn't know then, that we can help other people who are back where we used to be. And that to me is where a lot of the most fertile ground is for figuring out our encore careers, right?
I love that. Yeah.
And it can be personal, it can be professional, it can be our experience as people outside of work, it can be our experience in work.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about my career, why my career prepared me somewhat for this, because my career was always changing. I think I've already mentioned that, I did different things all the time. But when people would ask me, what do you do? If I wanted to just give them the brief answer, just go through, it would be, I'm a consultant and I help people do blah, 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 blah. But my real answer would have always been when. When they say, what do you do? I want to say, when. When do you want to know? Because I do so many different things. I just have this very eclectic potpourri of things that I do. But even for someone like me, it has been, it's not been this easy transition. And I am getting, you know what I've come to where I've realized much about me, and a lot of it is, it's understanding the core me, understanding me better and better and better.
Yep.
And I've come to understand me in a way that I've never understood quite so much before. And even as I'm articulating it now, it's kind of new and fresh. I haven't really articulated it well before, but it is very experiential.
Yes.
I have my meditative times of quiet that I spend a lot of time in silence. I'm an introvert, so I can spend hours in just sitting around and thinking and pondering and journaling. I write voraciously. But I have found I am big into experiential art. I love theater, and I go to art museums. I go to I'll go to the same ones maybe 2 or 3 times in a year. But I put on a headset and listen to soft, some kind of special music. And I will spend 2 or 3 hours in a museum just wandering and focusing on a piece of art and pondering that art, and thinking about it. And so there's so many experiential things. I go to movies. I have this movie pass that for $28 a month, I can go to AMC movies and I can see 4 movies a week for $28 a month. And so I take advantage of that, bro. I'm a movie fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, but it's about experiencing. It's about doing things. So I give myself that permission to do that. That's valuable for me. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I think we
And
don't
that's
give
hard,
ourselves
I think.
permission to that.
Yes, I agree. We don't. And there's a guilt that comes with everything. You and I were talking offline about the need to be, I think you said meaningful, but not necessarily productive.
Right, right.
I
Yes.
love that. I love that. I think that's one of the joys of this phase of life is we're not in the optimization, merry-go-round of corporate life, right? Where
Great way to
everything
put
has
it.
to be, yeah. And that's part of what we focus on is dropping the optimization mindset, right? And getting back in touch with, well, what is it about me that I love to do that I know can help other people? And then to your point, our third phase is the action phase. It's the how, right? It's what we call action and iteration. So we go from the why, which is discernment and reflection. The middle phase of the program is the what we call vision and strategy, starting
Right.
to mold our ideas around what our values and wisdom and talents and really non-negotiables are going to be for this next phase of life, right? So that gets into the what, and then it's time to get going. That's the how. And a big part of what we advocate for is what I call casting a wide net. It's giving ourselves permission to try stuff and dabble and have some fun. And if you want to do a podcast, do a couple of podcasts, right? If you want to write a couple of articles. If you want to do a coaching program, do a pilot and charge people $50 and tell them you want to learn. And there are a lot of ways to try things. But for those of us who have had what we perceive to be successful first careers,
Sure.
it creates this monolith behind us, where we hold ourselves up to this standard. If you were a senior partner at a big law firm, that's the reputation. Our ego clings to that, right? And so the next thing, we want it to reflect well on the past thing. But really, we've got to disconnect that, because that's just going to lead us back down ego-driven paths. And I really think that that's not where we want to be in this phase of life. And so I think, a big part of what we're trying to do is try things that are fulfilling, profitable too, but fulfilling, mission-driven, that we can do without a huge amount of risk and capital required. And then when we figure out what those are, then we double down, right? Just like you've done here, right?
Yeah, and I think the revenue phase, the making money from it, for me is almost a bonus.
Yeah.
That's not if I'm doing it for the money, then I'm still, if that's legitimate. That's fine. If you're doing it for the
Yep.
money and you can do it for the money and that gratifies you and develops you, beautiful.
Yep.
I think that's incredible. And then there are those of us that are kind of done with that and
Yep.
just want to be and experience. And you know what has led me down this path that's really helped, Jack,
Mm.
is spirituality.
Yeah. Very much.
We were talking about, offline. I don't think I did this. I'm forgetting, because we had to start the show over, so I'm forgetting what we talked about when. And did I already say this? So if I already said it, audience, just forgive me. I'm a little. My memory is not that accurate, but I spend a lot of time in with Richard Rohr and the Center of
Yep.
Action and Contemplation, and very deeply involved in contemplation and action. And so
Yep.
those are two important for me. So two important elements, TWO, two
Yeah.
important elements
Yeah.
to me, to my life. And that developing of that, I go monthly in 2 weeks. I go to the Abbey. I go to a monastery once a month for 3 days, meet with the
Wow.
spiritual director, hang out with the Benedictines, and pray the offices. And so that becomes a groundwork for me. That's a basis that's very, very helpful. My spirituality has led to a deeper understanding of me, especially in the contemplative life. It's a deeper understanding of who I am, which has really helped me formulate what my current career looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very much the same way. And I found, the center and Father Richard through some friends from my church in Atlanta, Presbyterian church, bunch of guys in their 40s at the time, or maybe early 50s, but here he is reaching, a group of guys like us and
hanging out with the Catholics.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've loved that, the essays and the reflections that come from the center. And I think, to me, it speaks to this need to get beyond the ego and to get into the true self of this next phase of life.
Nicely put.
David Brooks, the writer, had a great line in a TED Talk, and I'll send you a link for your show notes if people want to see it. But, he talked about the soul, right? And whether you're a person of faith or you're secular, his point was, I think we can all agree that we all have some sort of unique gifts here, right? We seem to have been wired with some collection of things that make us, our own fingerprint, right? And so a big part of what I'm trying to help people get in touch with is, what is that? And it's not just your talents, it's also your perspective and your judgment. And as we get older, it's your wisdom, right? It's the wisdom of age. And how can we get under the hood and figure out what that amalgamation is and figure out how we can best serve people that need us and that we love working with? And I think that, to me, is a big part of what we're looking for in this next phase of life. You talked about how big or small or how profitable or not profitable do we want it to be. It is a completely individual decision. And there's not a right or wrong to that. Other than that, I think this has to be a heart-centered phase of life, not
perfectly. Yes.
an ego-centered phase of life. Somebody was asking me about scaling this because, we're getting a lot of attention. There are not a lot of people talking about this. And yeah, it's exciting. I'm loving it. And so as a business person, there's an opportunity here, right? And I feel my ego calling to me, right? Let's go all in. But what I've been trying to communicate to, our team and to people who are invested, our clients, is, our focus on scaling is going to be to scale the mission, to scale our reach, our effectiveness. It's not going to be to scale for the sake of market domination. Or just for, ego purposes. And I understand those drives. I had them when I was younger, and they served me well in a lot of ways, right? But in this phase of life, I think, it's a hybrid, right? We need to look at things that are going to deliver the sort of income we need to live the life we want to live, but it's got to be fulfilling, and we got to feel like we're moving the needle for other people.
That is key. I am something that has helped me. I've been retired for about a decade, but still in the process of figuring it out. Don't think that 10 years, for me, 10 years I didn't finish. There's always a continual growth. And I got involved in one charity, Wells of Life, that we brought clean water to people in Africa, to villages in Africa. We would drill wells, and we've provided water for, I think, about 1.4 million people. And it's very, very exciting. And now I'm involved. I no longer am involved with that group. I'm now involved in a local group, where I deal with inner city in Orange County is largely Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And I deal with working with inner city kids and adults who maybe have just recently come to the United States and learning what the ABCs are of living in the United States. And our goal is to serve these people. And it's so fulfilling. And I'm still getting to do my coaching. I'm coaching the CEO and I get to
Yep.
work with leaders and directors there. It's very, very fulfilling, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's, I like the term the portfolio life. I'm not sure who
Right.
coined it, but I guess being in wealth management, it resonates with me.
Yes.
But we need different wedges, and the industry, the financial services industry, sees it as a pie, right? It's financial, but really, when you live it, it's a lot of wedges, right? And we need a wedge for a volunteer, but we also need a wedge for work. And I see this, people get this wrong a lot, and we conflate volunteer and work, and they're not the same. And we think, generously, that when we get to a point where we don't need the money, we'll give our time for free to a cause we believe in. And it's noble and it's important to volunteer, right? I mean, we should all do it, but that is a purely selfless act of giving, right? And we're not in it for recognition, and we're not in it for accolades.
Right. Exactly.
We're in it
Exactly.
because the opposite of those things. And if we do get recognized, we're a little self-conscious about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to
We're
be
in it for the
recognized.
mission. We're in it for the people. We're in to serve.
Right. But then we have work, right? And this gets to what we're sort of feel like we were put on this earth to do, these talents, these gifts that we were given to give back in a way that other people will value. And part of the valuing of that is paying for the value you're delivering, right? And that is when we feel needed and valued and accomplished. And as humans, we are wired with a need to feel accomplished. And volunteering is not about feeling accomplished, if that makes sense, because it's not about us, right?
Yeah, but it is kind of, I kind of take a little bit different position on that because I've lived in that world that has been my world pre-retirement and
Yep.
post-retirement. And so there is, I may not conflate them, but there is a real fine line between work and service. And for me, my work is service. It has always been, I've always been in a service like you in your business.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
always been in service. I used to make stupid money because I coached CEOs of billion-dollar companies. So I could make ridiculous money for just sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a place where I don't really make any money from my career. And, I'm actually in a place, what's odd in that my spiritual endeavors keeps me from wanting to make money. Richard
Interesting.
Rohr and I agree that, in ministry, we probably shouldn't be asking for money in our ministry. But my wife and I disagree on that because she's training to be a spiritual director now, and she's going to charge minimal fees, but she believes people need to have the skin in the game.
I think that's true. But this gets back to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I don't disagree with that. I have a different take, but I appreciate her take, and she's a successful business person, and she gets what it takes.
Yep. I agree. And I think there's a happy blend in here somewhere. But what I see is people who think, okay, I'm going to volunteer, and that's going to fill the void where work used to be. And it doesn't.
No, it won't. If you're just a walk around volunteer, my volunteering is volunteering at the leadership level. So
That's
I'm
very different.
impacting the organization, impacting people.
Right.
So my
Right.
work is automatically impact. So
Right.
I mean, my
Yep.
my service is impact service.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's very different. And truthfully, there aren't all that many opportunities for people to work at that level. Most volunteer opportunities are showing up and doing the frontline things that are important, right? It's making the lunch bags and
Right.
tutoring and all of those things that we have to have. But what people find is, if they've been in a very high achieving career and then they
Yeah.
think that's going to fill that void of accomplishment, it doesn't, right?
Oh, I get you, and I'm right with you. I so concur. Yeah.
And so that's what I try to help people. So you need a wedge of your portfolio life for that volunteer work. You need a wedge for your work. And that can be mission driven, right? But for a lot of people, they're going to need to keep generating some income. Even people
Okay.
who have millions of dollars, if they live to be 105 as opposed to 93, that's that's a lot of years, right? And that's going to start
Yeah,
happening.
that will. If I live to 105, that's going to screw up all my retirement plans.
So, that's so I think we've got to start facing reality about that. But if we can find a way to do this work that just delivers so much value for people and it's inspiring to us, then we can keep, earning the income, even if it's only for a period of our lives after our first career is over. But what I find is that, work has become this 4-letter word in society, right? And, the people that I talk to that reach out, through, whatever our advertising or, podcast, things like that, they're just fried. It's been eye-opening to me because I was in small business, even though our company managed a lot of money. We only had 10 or 15 people in the company.
Sure.
And talking to people coming out of very large corporations in America, large law firms and physicians practices, people are just fried. And it's because work has become so transactional and it's so bottom line driven and people feel so replaceable that by the time they reach out to me, most of them don't want to hear the word work.
Yes, I get it. I
Yep.
get it. I get
Yep.
it. One of the questions as we were talking earlier, and right into what you're talking about now, and about developing your work or your career, your encore career.
Yep.
What do you think about the use of assessment tools? Understand personality, talents assessment, strengths finders. My number one favorite is VIA character assessment that evaluates your character traits. And what do you think about those kind of tools to help move you along so you can get, when you're wondering about getting focused, what do I get focused on? Well, I need to get focused on what are, what are my divinely gifted talents
Yep.
that when I do them, when just exercising this talent gives me joy and pleasure and comfort
Right.
in life. And
Yep.
how do you feel about instruments that help you measure that gets you even the Enneagram and the
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs and
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
think of
I'm
those?
I'm a big fan of it as an arrow in the quiver, right? And I think it's very helpful. I think at the beginning we use them, right? And I'm a big fan of several of them, right? I love the Clifton Strengths. I love
Mm-hmm.
Colby company corporation does them. The Enneagram,
Mm-hmm.
Myers Briggs, all of those things. I think you got to find the right one for what your purposes
Or you
are,
do like me,
right?
you do all of them and
You do all of them.
because my wife is also a coach, and she's
Yep.
the assessment queen.
Yeah.
She has an account with Wiley, and so she does. She has all sorts of assessment instruments that she does. So anytime she has an instrument, she'll give to me just as a test,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I
I love
they
them.
all. Really, in the end of the day, after I've done so many, they all land up on the same thing. But it's fun to know.
It is, and what's interesting to me, the good ones are still ahas, and there's some that at this point in life you're like, I'm a communicator. Okay, well I knew that. I've done that my whole life, right? But some of them go deeper and really, I think, show you what you're made of, and not only what your strengths are, but the areas where you should stop striving to get better and just find people to help you, right? And for me, getting organized, for example, I just have finally realized I need to quit telling myself I got to get organized and just find people to help me stay organized, right? I'm much more about communicating and creative stuff, and I need to stay in that lane where I feel like those are my natural gifts, you know?
You know, I've got to, since I brought up the idea of instruments, and there's one that's understated, but this VIA, Character Strengths Profile. You know what it does is it has 25 character attributes, and it ranks how you fit, what your top character attributes are and how you use them.
Yep.
This, I got to tell you, Jack, this was the most helpful. This thing defined me more than anything else has ever really defined me. And I'll give you an idea. The top 5 for me are love, spirituality, creativity, love of learning, and curiosity.
Mhm.
Those, as long as I find myself, now that I know those, I know my talents and how my talents will fit into those. But if I am focusing on love and learning and creativity and curiosity, I'm a happy camper, bro.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
really, I mean, they really nailed, because that is who I am. Those 5 character
Yep.
traits really define me, but now they're defining my actions.
Yep.
So they are really helpful, I think, and I'm just wondering if you concur.
Oh, I do, absolutely. And like the Clifton Strengths, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came out of that I knew some things, right? It said I was ideation and
Mm-hmm.
strategic were 2 of my big ones, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew that. I knew that those were strengths. But it also had me way down the list with implementation and execution, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's true. I get really bored with that stuff. And so as a creative, I
Yeah,
would
and
get
that's why, and that's
frustrated
why,
with
and that's
getting
why
these.
your Wi-Fi thing, you're not good at. You're great on the idea. You're great on coming up with the idea. What's it all about? What's it look like? What's it feel like?
Right.
Smell like? But now, how do I
Yep.
get it into the hands of the consumer? That's God, just buy it. It's good.
That's when it got really boring and tedious for me, right?
I
And that's
know. I
also,
get it.
as it happens, really critical for a viable business. And so I think it's great to start with that at the beginning of these processes. I think it gives us our sort of bearings. I like to use them because I want to point out to people um, you've got both. You've got your strengths, you've got things you're not as good at. Quit beating yourself up about these things at the bottom. Let's find people to help you with those. Let's focus on
Right.
these topics, right? And let's just let that stuff go that we're not born to do. It takes a lot of bees to run the hive. Let's just focus on the bee we are and build our encore career around that, right?
Yeah, I love that. That is great. That's a distinction, is it not? One of the distinctions of an encore career is you get to do what you're really good at, and what you're not good at, you can, for the most part, there's always exceptions, but for the most part, you can ignore that. Don't
Yeah.
include that in your career definition. Your
Right.
encore career definition will not include those things that you're weak at,
Yeah. And there's so
unless you
many.
have staff to do that.
Well, and there's so many ways to build a team, a small team, even if it's just your personal team to help with that stuff, right? For people who are organized, if that's something I lack, or for people who need ideas, they can use me for that, right? And they're
Right.
great at strategy and implementation. And let's create an ecosystem, where we have a team, and we're all, in the symphony, right? And so I think that that's the best Encore career plan is let's do this stuff that puts us in flow states that we feel like we're just jamming and we know what we're doing and we know why we're here. And it might be something that we maybe we spent 20% of our time in our first career doing if we were lucky, right? And now it gets to be 80 or 90% of what we do. And that to me is when you're hitting it, you're jamming.
I love that. As I'm looking at our time and how many things we could do, I like sort of wrapping with that question.
Yeah.
I think that is a beautiful entree into developing an encore career. You get to focus on what you're good at and
Yep.
what you love to do.
Yep.
And then what you love to do, I have a friend who does a lot of work on genius. And she says we are not genius. We have a genius. We are genius at certain areas. And what are we
I
genius
love it.
at? This is when
Yep.
your genius emerges. Is when you're doing what you're passionate about, your genius emerges. And you were suggesting that people have an opportunity to create a career around their genius. Taryn Voget is
Yeah.
her name.
That's the whole essence of what we're trying to do. And I'm a big fan of, I know we got to go, of Gay Hendricks, who wrote the book.
Okay, yeah.
He's out in your neck of the woods, and one of his books was Your Genius Zone, right? And what's
I'm not
interesting,
aware of that. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people are shy away from the term genius because it feels immodest. And the point is that this is God's genius, in my opinion, or the universe's, or however you want to define it.
Yeah.
But we're not declaring ourselves geniuses. This is something larger that we've been gifted with that we want to build around for this next phase of our life. It's the genius we've been gifted, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Our conversation, Jack Calhoun, thank you so much for spending time with me. You are, I can't wait to send people to the Encore Career, because that title, that is going to stick with me. I will give you credit for it, but I'm going to steal it. It's a bitchin' title. It really works. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I was going for a bitchin' title.
Okay. All right, bro. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.